This happened about 10 years ago. I grew up in a modest house. It wasn't exactly large, but it was cozy enough for our family. For most of my childhood, I shared a bedroom with my older brother. The room had 2 twin beds on opposite sides, 2 dressers, and 2 closets. We didn't even have enough room for a desk, but we made do. It wasn't cramped, but it wasn't spacious either. The room felt like a small island in our otherwise bustling house. A place where we could retreat to, though not without occasional conflict. We spent our time arguing over trivial things, but at the end of the day, it was home. Then, when my brother left for college, the dynamic of the house completely shifted, and I knew it was my turn to take over. The thought of finally having a room to myself felt both liberating and slightly daunting. When my brother left for college, the house seemed different without him. His absence was quiet, and the usual sounds of sibling rivalry were replaced with an eerie stillness. I immediately moved his bed to the other side of the room and laid claim to the space as my own. Finally, I had room for a desk, and the thought of having my own little area to focus on schoolwork felt like a luxury. For those 2 years, it was just me and the space. A setup that was perfect for studying, reflecting, and growing into adulthood. I no longer had to worry about sharing anything or competing for space. The time alone in that room felt like a period of self-discovery. It was a place of solace where I could escape and just be myself. But as the years passed, that chapter 2 came to an end when I left for college, and the house was once again different. The quiet didn't last long, and soon the chaos of family life filled the house again. After I graduated, my brother returned to the area for work. He moved back in with our parents, and the first thing he did when he got home, he took back the room I had spent months making my own. It was like he was reclaiming what was once his. At first I was annoyed, but my parents explained that I had done the same thing when he left, and so it was only fair that he did the same. It made sense, and I had to admit that they were right. It wasn't a huge deal, but I couldn't help feeling a little irritated by how quickly everything changed. I had put so much time and effort into making that room my own, and now, just like that, it was his again. But I understood that life had a way of shifting things around, and you just had to go with it. I learned to let go and move forward, accepting the changes, even when they didn't feel fair. When I graduated and found a job in the city, I also moved back in with my parents, just like my brother had. But by then, there was no longer a room for me. My old space had been overtaken, and I was left without a place of my own. The only available room was the upstairs guest bedroom. It was much smaller than my previous room, but it would have to do. The guest room, located directly above the garage, had its own quirks. Every time someone opened the garage door, the floor would vibrate, a sensation I eventually grew accustomed to. The space felt isolated, but at least it offered privacy. The room had 2 windows, one facing the driveway and the other overlooking the side of the house. It was far from ideal, but it was quiet and peaceful for the most part. I couldn't complain, but it wasn't my old room. It felt like a temporary solution, a way to make do until I could figure out where I truly belonged. One Friday night, around 11:30 p.m., I found myself home alone. My brother was away for a work conference, and my parents were spending the weekend at the Shore House. The house was eerily quiet, almost too quiet. I had just come off a long, grueling week of work, so I decided not to go out. Instead, I stayed in, ordered some food, and planned to unwind with a book. The peaceful silence of the house was almost comforting. There were no distractions, no demands. It was just me and my thoughts, lost in the pages of my book. For a moment, I almost forgot how unsettling the house could be when it was this quiet. It was late, but the stillness had a way of making everything seem normal. But that quiet didn't last long. Suddenly, I heard the unmistakable sound of the garage door opening, followed by the familiar vibrations through the floor. It only took a second for the realization to sink in. No one was supposed to be home. I jumped out of bed and rushed to the window, trying to see what was going on. But it was too dark to make out any details. All I could see was the garage door, wide open. My heart raced and my stomach churned. None of my family should have been home. My parents were at the shore house, and my brother wasn't supposed to return until the next day. My mind raced, trying to come up with logical explanations. Maybe my parents forgot something. Maybe the door malfunctioned. But none of these thoughts helped ease the growing panic inside me. I needed to know what was happening, without another thought. I grabbed a baseball bat from the closet, something my parents had kept from when I was younger, and cautiously made my way down the stairs. As I crept down the hallway, my mind was on high alert. My senses were sharp, and every little sound seemed amplified. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The closer I got to the living room, the more I could hear voices. Soft, indistinct murmurs. They were coming from the direction of the bedrooms. I froze, my stomach dropped. The voices were low, but they were unmistakably human. It didn't take long for me to realize that someone had broken into the house. I quickly pulled my phone out of my pocket and dialed 911. The operator answered, and I whispered my address, explaining that the house was being burglarized. She told me to stay quiet and not to alert the intruders to my presence. But something inside me felt compelled to act. I couldn't just hide and wait. I had to protect my home, even if I was outnumbered. My instincts told me to confront them. So, I silently moved down the hall, the bat still gripped tightly in my hands, ready for whatever was waiting for me. When I reached the door to my parents' room, I could hear drawers opening and things being shifted around. I knew they were looking for something valuable. My heart pounded in my chest. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open and charged into the room, screaming at the top of my lungs to catch them off guard. I saw two men in the room, both rummaging through my mother's things. They were completely unprepared for what was coming. I swung the bat, hitting one of the men in the leg. He cursed and hobbled back, but before I could swing again, the other man lunged at me, knocking me to the floor. The impact was brutal. I struggled to free myself, but he was much stronger than I was. He grabbed the bat out of my hands with ease and then wrapped his hands around my throat. The pressure on my neck was suffocating, and I began to lose consciousness. I thought for sure this was the end, just as everything started to go black. I heard the faint sound of sirens approaching in the distance. That was the last thing I remembered before everything went dark. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor, and a police officer was kneeling beside me, shaking me gently. My head throbbed, and everything felt blurry. It took a few moments for my mind to catch up with reality. I looked around the room and saw that the door leading to the backyard was wide open. The burglars had clearly heard the sirens and fled through the back. I was alive, but I couldn't shake the feeling of how close I had come to death. The officers told me to stay still until the paramedics arrived, and they confirmed that I wasn't seriously injured, though I had a severe headache. The police launched an investigation, but the burglars were never caught. The whole thing felt like a nightmare I couldn't escape.